Hello and welcome to Radical Resilience. I'm Susanna Barkataki.
And I'm Neelam Pathikonda. And today we are going to be talking about the COVID vaccine. We are two best friends that work in wellness and medicine, and we're excited to bring some information to you in a really non-judgmental way.
There is a lot of misinformation out there, and especially in the yoga and wellness communities. We wanted to share this information in a non-judgmental way so you can make an informed decision.
We're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to act out a little bit of a role play. I'm going to play the part of a doctor, which is what I do every day. And Susanna,
I will play the part of a patient. And the truth is, I have very real questions. I believe in Western medicine, but I also have experienced a lot of wonderful benefits from alternative medicines and have some questions. So I'm going to ask them in the role of a patient who's hesitant and questioning getting the COVID vaccine.
Let's do it.
Thanks for seeing me today, doctor. I have some questions for you. I've been hearing about this COVID vaccine and it feels really rushed. How did they figure out how to put a vaccine in us so quickly? Frankly, I just don't trust it.
So let's talk a little bit about what a vaccine is. So first of all, a vaccine inserts a little piece of the virus into our body, which gives ourselves, our immune system, which is just this natural, wonderful, innate part of ourselves, the ability to then make our defenses against this virus. So if we ever came across it in the world, we would be prepared.
That's helpful. But I'm really healthy. I'm a healthy person. I eat well, I exercise. So I'm not that worried about COVID. I feel like I'll be fine.
Yeah, it's really, really different than getting COVID because with the vaccine, you might have some side effects. It's very different than getting sick. We don't really know why some people get sick to the point of needing hospitalization or a ventilator and why some people don't. We don't know why some people have long COVID, where 6 months later, they still have brain fog and headaches and fatigue and sometimes shortness of breath. I really think you ought to think about whether or not your family, yourself would want that. That's not something you have to think about with the vaccine, regardless of the side effects that are there. But I want to get to your question, which was about feeling like this was so rushed. So this technology is not new. It feels like it came out really fast, but it was actually developed under the Obama administration, in part by an African-American woman. It was for Zika and Nipah, which are two viruses that were causing pandemics at the time, but they kind of petered out before we could really put this vaccine into play. So it was always in preparation for a pandemic. And the point was that it could be rapidly put into play because we knew in situations of pandemic, time is of the essence. If this virus keeps going, it keeps mutating. It threatens the lives of all of us. If we can't get it under control quickly, we lose out to the virus, essentially. The virus beats us. So time is of the essence. So that's why a lot of the steps were rushed. And I do want to point out the steps that were rushed were not safety, because they spent a long time doing safety, doing all of the safety research. But what was rushed was the paperwork, bureaucracy, the stuff that gets in the way of doing the safety research. There was a ton of participants, 70,000 people who signed up for these vaccine trials. And so we have data on all of these 70,000 people, the same as if we would have done for other vaccinations. And we know we've tracked for 7 months now what their vaccination side effects are. And it's pretty safe. Most vaccine side effects are about 2 to 3 months afterwards. The only side effect that has been serious has been an allergic reaction. Other than that, it's been a relatively safe vaccine. In fact, one of our safest that we've developed.
So doctor, if you're saying if I'm going to get sick, it's not the same thing if I get sick from a side effect from a vaccine as getting sick from COVID. Because that's the other thing I was wondering is like, well, what's the difference, right? I've been hearing about these side effects and, sometimes people share these articles about terrible vaccine side effects all the time. And what's the difference between getting sick from a vaccine and getting sick from COVID?
great question. So vaccine side effects are real. I had the vaccine, and we're talking about the 2 vaccines that are developed and are FDA approved. So the Pfizer and Moderna are the only ones that are approved as of this recording. And the vaccine, I had a sore arm, I had fatigue, I had muscle aches, I had a headache a little bit, and it lasted about a day. And the first vaccine was okay, and the second vaccine was a little bit more of the side effects. My dad had no side effects. The difference was I didn't have to quarantine from my family. I
Mm.
didn't have to worry I was going to pass this virus on to someone else that might die from it. I didn't have to worry that I was going to be hospitalized, or that I was going to be on a ventilator, or that I was going to die from COVID. Like, that is not the same thing as getting sick from COVID, when you don't know what the outcome is going to be, when you have to quarantine, when you can't go to work. Like, it's entirely different.
Mm. Okay, that makes sense. I guess I also wonder, I'm a really healthy person, like I mentioned, and I drink a lot of green juice and I eat organic. And so, like, what are you actually injecting in me? I want to know.
Yeah, it makes sense. I drink a lot of green juice too. Green juice is good,
I mean,
definitely.
I drink coffee too, and but yeah, green juice is
Good.
good.
So it's important to know that this is an mRNA vaccine, both of the ones that were approved so far. So that means mRNA is just a little piece of nucleic acid that tells a cell what to make. And in this case, it tells the cell to make a little protein on the end of the coronavirus called the spike protein. So that way the immune system recognizes the spike protein if it ever sees it again and is ready to go. And so just like the virus, as it goes through the population, we don't want the virus to overwhelm our system. So if we can get it quick and smash it, we're good, we're done. There's no eggs, no thimerosal, no preservatives, no latex. The manufacturers of this vaccine were very careful, because they know that we're all looking, we're all wondering, and we all want it to be safe. And they should be careful, and they should be safe. There's nothing else. There's no preservatives. It's the mRNA. There's not even an adjuvant, which sometimes increases our immune response. There's not even that.
So, but you said mRNA, and I don't, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know all these things, but I remember learning about DNA in biology. And so I've heard too, can this vaccine change our DNA? Does it go into our DNA? Tell me about that.
So it does not go into our DNA, it doesn't even go into the nucleus of the cell. So it cannot alter the DNA at all. It's not a live virus, so we're not actually injecting the virus into you.
Hmm.
Again, it's just it's entering cells, causing the cell to make a protein, but it definitely does not enter the DNA or the nucleus of the cell.
Okay. And then I have some questions. I don't want you to think that anything different about me, but a lot of my friends in the wellness community have been talking about 5G and tracking, and that, big government is trying to control us with this vaccine, and it's all a conspiracy, and can even cause infertility. These are all things that, I try to be a thoughtful person. I try to be a questioning person, and not just do something because the authorities tell me to do it. Can you answer my concerns about that?
Definitely. And I want you to be a thoughtful person. I want everybody to be thoughtful. And that's why it's important to get the right kind of information. So it's a complete myth that there's a chip or 5G or any kind of tracking device in the vaccine. We just don't have the money for that. Like, we can't even get the vaccine out. When you think about public health and you think about trying to roll this out, it's just so costly. I often tell patients and my friends, and like, we don't need chips in the vaccine because we all have our phones, like, they can track us anyway. If they wanted to, they could track everything. So there's just no reason to, and it's absolutely false.
Okay.
The infertility this stems from a lot of misinformation. There's an idea out there that the spike protein will target antibodies towards another protein called synctin-1, which is used for placental attachment. But these proteins aren't even the same. They're very structurally dissimilar. So there's no risk to pregnancy. There's no reason to think this would cause infertility. In fact, pregnancies occurred in both trials of the vaccine safety trials. The The thing that's important to note is that there is a risk of doing nothing. And we often think about the risk of vaccines, but we have to also think about the risk of not vaccinating.
Mm.
And it's huge. It means that, the vaccine kind of rolls through our communities. There's hospitalizations, there's hospitals and medical workers that are getting overwhelmed. There's death and disease. And then there's long COVID where people get, symptoms for a long time and are really can't go to work. A
Right.
lot of disability that comes from, there's a risk for doing nothing.
From
So
the virus. Yeah.
from the virus, exactly. So when you think and you're weighing out your options, you really have to think about the risk of the vaccine versus the risk of the virus.
And so, can you tell me how effective actually is this vaccine? If I go ahead and get it, how effective, how protected will I be? And will my community be if they get it too against COVID?
These vaccines are incredibly effective. In fact, a lot of people are in the medical establishment are like, we're underselling this vaccine. It's one of our most effective vaccines out there. Both vaccines that are on the market now, which again are the Pfizer and the Moderna, they're both comparable at like 95% effective, which means you are more likely to get hit by lightning than to get COVID after 2 vaccines.
Hmm.
It's important to know also that you are 100% protected against hospitalization, against death from COVID when you have the vaccine. So maybe you get COVID after you've been vaccinated. What you're going to feel is a cold, which a lot of coronaviruses are. They just cause a common cold. They don't cause hospitalizations. They don't cause you to be on a ventilator, and they definitely don't cause death. That's what this means. It's protection against death.
Well, that is pretty convincing when you say 100%, likely that I will not be hospitalized or die. That's a convincing statistic, I will say.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why it's so important. We talk about herd immunity, and that's when all of us have protection so that the virus has nowhere to go. The only way to get to herd immunity, for the virus to kind of peter out and for us to resume a sense of normalcy at all, is through the vaccine.
So you're saying it's not just good for me, it's good for my family, my friends, our economy.
It's the best way that we can show community care right now, is to think about our friends, our family, the economy. Exactly. All of us need connection. We need to be out of our homes. We don't want to be home with masks on. We want our kids to go back to school. We want to be on trips and planes. If we want to do this, we have 2 choices. We can let the virus rampage our communities and, kill who it's going to kill and infect who it's going to infect and see what happens, or we can vaccinate.
Well, thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Susanna, for asking those questions. We're going to transition now to a little bit of conversation about the COVID vaccine. One thing I wanted to bring up was that that vaccinations in general have been around for a long time, that there's accounts in China and India from the 1500s that people who have survived as smallpox as a child didn't get it later in life. So they would grind up smallpox scabs and blow it into the nostrils. They would scratch smallpox sores, move them onto the skin of people who never got smallpox. Some histories of vaccines say it's been around since 2000 BC. Like, this is from our communities using the innate power of our immune system.
It's pretty amazing when you think about all of the infectious diseases that we've been able to eradicate or greatly reduce the harm from. And even in our lifetimes, seeing, we both have children, and my kiddo doesn't have to worry about getting chickenpox because we have the chickenpox vaccine. Whereas I don't know about you, but I had to miss a whole school trip, and having chickenpox was a really miserable thing. And so just from even seeing my own experience of that, and also my family who is from India, and Britain, and the impact that other much more severe illnesses like polio have had on members of my own family that live in countries where they didn't have access to those vaccines.
Absolutely. I think about trips to India all the time when I was little and just watching people who had suffered from polio and the effects of that on their lives, not being able to use their limbs and not being able to walk anymore. And just think about how human history has been a history of infectious disease. It's kind of the first time that we've actually are dying of other things. And that's because of vaccines. We can't really downplay that importance. And you just need to go somewhere like India and see what happens when we don't have vaccination.
So one of the biggest concerns, and I will say, as I was playing the role of a reluctant patient, these are real questions that I have. Many of those questions are real questions. I also know my communities, other folks of color, communities of color, there are very real reasons why we might distrust public health officials or the government or medical systems and the way that they work and have worked, not so much in our favor or on our bodies without our consent. And so I want to name that because that's something that's important in this conversation and also leads to mistrust that is valid mistrust. And at the same time, we're in a situation where I was looking at the statistic from Time Magazine and that Black and Latinx folks are making up 60% of the hospitalizations from COVID. Folks of color, particularly Black and Latinx folks, make up 4 times the hospitalizations and are 3 times more likely to die. And so those are some really sobering statistics at the same time that the communities that need the protection are the ones that are being the most impacted. So we've got this really intense racialized discrimination. I also want to say that's not because of some inherent inferiority in folks of color. It's because of racism in our healthcare systems that we've dealt with for many, many years.
Absolutely. I mean, Western medicine has a long history of racism attached to it. I totally understand the hesitancy and the reluctance, especially by communities of color. What we don't hear about oftentimes is the contributions from people of color to Western medicine. And that's because of the same racism that we're just not taught about those things. So when we did some research on this, there are very real concerns that communities of color have, and they come from real places. There's been a history that has not been kind and has used the bodies of people of color without consent. That being said, the same racism and white supremacy that causes us pause also ignores the contributions of Black, Indigenous, people of color in Western medicine. There's been so many contributions to Western medicine. Like, this is not just something out there that doesn't have us and our stamp on it. One thing that I was researching was about an enslaved man named Onesimus. I'm probably butchering the name, but he basically rubbed pus from an infected person who had smallpox into an open wound on the arm and realized that this causes inoculation. Again, using this very natural and innate part of ourselves, which is our immune system, to fight off disease and to prevent disease, more importantly. He saved a whole bunch of people in Boston. So this is not something out there that other people are doing. This is also something that's in our communities. Part of why I went to med school is because I recognize that there's very valuable contributions and important things that we need from Western medicine and from the healthcare system. And I wanted access for people of color and for communities that don't often have access to the kind of healthcare that other folks have. And this is playing out right now. White folks are being vaccinated at a rate that's 3 times higher than communities of color. So we have an obligation and a duty to get out this information and also really try to reverse the tide of health disparities that we see. It's in our best interest, but it's everybody's best interest. We realize now that we can't stop a virus over here and protect communities over here. This is all, we're all together on this.
We're so connected. This is ultimately for me why I personally will jump at the opportunity to get the vaccination when it is available for my category, my grouping, because I will be getting it not just for myself, but for my family, for my friends, and for the community. And that kind of choice making that is about collective care and that is about solidarity is just as important to me as my own personal individual well-being and health. And we're in this time of where the illusion of our separation, we've talked about this before, is gone. We are so connected. We always have been. And this is part of some of the knowledge and truths from the spiritual wisdom that we love to practice and many people might share. And we're experiencing it real time. And so our decisions in life from day to day now actually need to support that interconnection.
Absolutely. Never before has our breath been so powerful. Like when we think about like breathing and how much of a luxury that is and a privilege, but also we talk about an airborne disease, how much we can spread with it. It is actually profound when you think about it that way.
It truly is. We are going to transition to a meditation to close because we appreciate your presence here and your willingness to learn and listen to different perspectives and to take that information and to support you in thinking critically and making the right decision for yourself. And so we want to offer you a meditation for making hard decisions. So wherever you are, you can sit or stand or lie down easily. Feel the support of your seat and your feet. You can gaze at a gentle spot in front of you. Let the eyes close if you would like. And begin to focus on your breath, the powerful force of life. Notice the inhale and your exhale. And we'll take a deep breath in through the nose and sigh it out through the mouth with a sound. Once more, inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. And one final time, big breath in through the nose and exhale with a sound, letting everything go. Now you can let your breath return to its normal rhythm. Allowing the inhale and exhale to happen naturally. The breath is something that you can count on. It's always there with you through your life. And so imagine now that you can follow your inhale as it comes in through your nose and down back through the throat into the core of the body, the lungs, into this inner space of you. Just like no one can breathe for you, no one can decide big life choices for you. And so on the inhale, bolster your own inner strength and knowing. And on the exhale, breathe out any misinformation, desires to be liked, need to fit in, letting go of anything that clouds your own judgment, your own inner authority. Taking in informed knowledge, credible information, and then sitting with that right there at the core of you, holding that information close, and from this clear place of integrity with yourself, allowing yourself to move forward with the right decision for you. And you may even ask yourself a yes or no question. You can start with something simple like, my name is, and say your name in your mind's eye. And notice, does your body lean back or forward? So if I say, my name is Susanna, my body leans forward in assent. And so you can ask yourself this question, the question that is on your heart or mind, after connecting to your inner knowing. You're here and you're able to make hard decisions. And so you may ask, should I get the vaccine? Should I get the COVID-19 vaccine? And let your body, informed by clear information, guide your decision making. We'll come back to the breath. Inhale and exhale. And then slowly shift a little bit left and right, knowing that you can come back to this inner wisdom place of clear decision making at any time. You can open your eyes if they're closed, look around you, and thank you for being here with us for Radical Resilience, How to Live Well in a Sick World.
There is always new and emerging data when it comes to COVID vaccines, so we encourage you to check the CDC and the resources we have for you in our show notes to get the latest information. Also, we misspoke in this episode. New data from countries that have been vaccinating large portions of their population shows that the vaccine prevents serious disease and hospitalization at near 100%, but not completely 100%.
Join us in the next episode where we explore the far-right conspiracy theorists who are driving the modern-day anti-vax movement. These are some of the same folks who stormed our Capitol in January 2021.
We will explore the ties between anti-science thought, white supremacy, magical wellness thinking, and help answer the question, who do we want to take life-changing advice from?
For show notes and a meditation, visit our website, ignitebewell.com/radical resilience. If you got something from this episode, please leave us a review and subscribe. Thank you all for listening to Radical Resilience, How to Live Well in a Sick World.